I'm Pastor Catherine Bowers at Evansburg United Methodist Church with a message for June 28th. This is the second in our series about the family drama in the book of Genesis. Last week, we met Abram and Sarai. Their names will later be changed to Abraham and Sarah. And they are already getting on in years when the Lord comes to Abraham and says, "Get up and go to a place that I will show you." And at that time, the Lord made some beautiful promises to Abram, that he would have many descendants, that he would give them the land, and that they would be a blessing to all the families of the earth. Abraham and Sarah didn't yet have any children, but they did it. They got up and they moved to a new place far from the home they knew. They went to the land of Canaan, the land that God promised to Abraham for his descendants. After they arrived in Canaan, we could imagine them thinking, "Here we are, Lord, we came. Let the blessings begin. Let the children come. Let the prosperity come and the destiny that you have promised to us." But it doesn't happen right away. They don't have any children right away. It's going to be a winding road to the promises of God. Soon there's a problem with the land. There's a famine. So Abraham and Sarah have to leave. It gets so bad, they have to go to Egypt to find food. And maybe they don't want to go to Egypt, but they have to. In this story, we see two kinds of immigrant experiences. There are lots of stories in the Bible about people who have to get up and go somewhere else. The first immigrant experience is when Abram gets up and goes to Canaan. And he's doing just fine where he lives in Haran. He doesn't have to go there. But he goes there because a new life has been promised to him. He goes there to build a future. The second time they move, when they have to go to Egypt, it's for survival. It's because they have to. It's because their lives are at stake. And this is a second kind of immigrant experience that we see. Both have happened in the history of our nation, people who come here just in hopes of building a wonderful future, and others who come because they are desperate, they are in danger, their very lives are at stake. And we continue to have both of these kinds of people that come here. Abraham and Sarah went to Egypt not because they wanted to, but because they had to. It's not what they expected to happen. It's not what they planned to happen. It appears that Abraham is very worried about the Egyptians and how they will treat him. Sarah is very beautiful, and he's afraid the Egyptians will kill him so they can take her. So he comes up with a plan. Abraham says to Sarah, "Pretend that you're my sister." And she does. This was not faith. This was fear. This was not confidence that God would keep the promises made to him. So unhappy things happened on the way to the promise. Eventually, the Egyptians find out that Abraham lied, and they are unhappy about it. And in this story, they seem even more righteous than Abraham. They say, "We don't like that you didn't tell us the truth, and now we want you to leave." So Abraham and Sarah go back to Canaan. Another unhappy thing that happened was that there were disputes between the people who worked for Abraham and the people who worked for his nephew Lot. Remember, Abraham came to Canaan with his nephew Lot, and by this time they both have many herds and servants, and they're getting into disputes, and it's getting so bad that Abraham summons Lot, and he says, we're kin, we shouldn't be fighting. Let's make an agreement that you'll go in one direction and with all your people and flocks, and I'll go in another. And so Lot went to the left, and Abraham went to the right. Soon there was a problem where Lot went. There were some local wars, and Lot was captured along with his family and all his possessions and taken away. This word gets back about this to Abraham, and he musters a group of men to go and rescue Lot. 318 men, we're told. Abraham brings with him, and they are successful. It shows you how wealthy Abraham was, that he had 318 men. They are successful, and they rescue Lot and his family and bring his possessions back. Abraham and Sarah are still waiting on God for promises to be kept. They have no children yet. At some point, Sarah is tired of waiting, and she comes up with a plan to help God along. She makes a proposal to Abraham. You take my slave girl and have a child with her, and then we'll have a family. Abraham agreed to it. The Egyptian slave girl, Hagar, had a son, and he was named Ishmael. But that doesn't go too well. It causes strife in the household between Hagar and Sarah. And Sarah ends up putting them out, putting Hagar and her little baby out in the desert. God sees the injustice that is done to Hagar and rescues her, and rescues the child from hunger and thirst. God recognizes that an injustice has been done, and it looks in the story like God takes Hagar's side on this. God even gives her a blessing. So Abraham, for all of his faith, had times of doubt. On the way to the promise, he tried some shortcuts. They didn't turn out so well. All of this has already happened when 3 traveling strangers come to visit Abraham. What he doesn't know is that they are angels with a message from God. Abraham greets them respectfully and urges them to sit down and take a rest. He offers the best hospitality that he has to these travelers. He offered them food, the best that he had, breads and cakes. And if that wasn't enough, he told them, stay a while. And he had a calf slaughtered so that he could serve them meat. In the Bible, hospitality is a very important virtue. So Abraham is doing everything right in this story. Kindness to strangers, hospitality. The strangers ask Abraham where his wife Sarah is. Sarah's listening at the back of the tent. Abraham says, she's in the tent. And then they give Abraham a message. They tell him that Sarah will soon have a son. Sarah, who's been listening, laughs out loud. It's not a laugh of joy. It's a laugh of derision. She thinks, these men don't know what they're talking about. She knows that she is past the age when she can have children. And what would these men know about women's bodies? And what would they know about her? It is too late for her, she thinks, and so she laughs. You can hear all the disappointment that she's had over the years in that laugh, and in her words when she says, after I have grown old and my husband is old, will I have joy? Of course, in those times, it's extremely rude to laugh at your guests. So when the men say, why did Sarah laugh? Sarah says, I didn't laugh. But they know she did. And then they ask this unusual question, is anything too wonderful for the Lord? Is anything too wonderful for the Lord? You see, it's not about whether Abraham doubted or Sarah doubted. It's about what God is going to do. God has made a promise, and God is going to keep it. Is anything too wonderful for the Lord? That is a question we should ask ourselves more often when we feel cynical, when we feel skeptical and tired. Is anything too wonderful for the Lord? These three strangers are encouraging Sarah to raise your faith. Raise your faith. Remember who the Lord is. Is anything too wonderful for the Lord? I saw a flyer one time that was anti-religion. I think it was also anti-Jewish. What it had was a list of Bible heroes and terrible things they had done. It said Abraham was a liar and a child abuser, and Moses was a murderer, and it went on from there. And in a hostile way, it said you'd have to be a fool to follow this religion that lifts up these people as heroes. You see, our Bible reports both the greatness and the failures of people of faith. It doesn't hide that we have sins, that people sometimes do the wrong things. And I thought when I read that flyer, you really don't get it. It's not about these people being perfect. It's about what God does in spite of all of our failures. That's what the stories are about. Somebody made a chart of all the stories of Abraham, and they made a graph of doubt and faith. And the graph kind of went up and down and up and down. And isn't that like all of us? It reminded me of something else I heard from an Olympic coach. He was being interviewed. He had coached several successful Olympic runners, and he said, progress doesn't go in a straight line. You know, the runners get discouraged when they're doing less well than they did before. He said, but progress goes like this. It would be great if we could avoid all the mistakes that we make in the life of faith. How much better it would have been for Abraham and Sarah if they hadn't doubted. But God kept the promise anyway. Abraham didn't change God by doubting. He just made things a little harder on himself. Sarah's joy was not taken away from her because she doubted. Instead, she found in a very short time that God was indeed going to keep the promise. She was going to have what she always wanted. She soon gave birth to Isaac. The name Isaac means laughter. Sarah laughed again, but this time it was a laugh of pure joy. She traded her laugh of cynicism for her laugh of joy. And she said, God has brought laughter for me. Keep that question with you that the strangers asked Abraham, is anything too wonderful for God? On the winding road of life, God still loves us and has good things ahead for us.